very high in this spot, and we tried to grow really heat-loving annuals in this place for a long time, pumpkins and tomatoes, and we went to water them every day, and then we would go on holidays for a few days, and when we come back there's not much left of those plants because it's so hot and so dry, really, on the surface at least. And these plants never seem to develop big enough root systems to become self-sustaining on anything. So it was quite intense. So after a while we decided, no, we have to redo this. We're just working our butts off. We don't get any yield from this place. So we covered the whole area in compost, just to add some more extra organic material, about 3 centimeters. It's just 30 square meters we're talking about here. It's not big. Then we put cardboard and newspapers on top, and lots of straw that we had. We had a big straw bale delivered to the house. We covered it with straw, and then we waited for a few months, and then we made small holes in the cardboard and newspapers, and then we planted perennial vegetables. And this looks nothing like what I thought would be a forest garden when I first heard the term forest garden. But it still follows the same principles in a way. When we think back at the forest once again, in the forest the entire root horizon is filled with roots of all kinds of shapes and thicknesses and so on. And that's kind of what one of the things that we tried is to mix plants with different root architectures. We also tried to put in plants that are quite early, like as in the forest. In the forest there's very few annual plants. Annual plants are specialized in disturbed soil. They need lots of light, usually open soil. So we put in perennials that most of them are quite early in the season. They actually can outcompete many even of the like couch grass, one of those nasty perennial weeds that comes in all our vegetable patches all the time. They're about as early as that one, or even earlier, many of these. And once they've grown up, they shade the soil basically, which makes it really hard for seeds to germinate, and really hard for the couch grass to come in and grow, because it also needs a lot of light. Couch grass is just another one of tools that the forest uses to kind of prepare for the future forest to come, to cover bare loose soil as quickly as possible. It's called quackgrass, I think, sometimes as well. You know which plant I'm talking about? Yeah, that's it. That's one of the words I was supposed to learn until I come here. I forgot again. And in the fall we harvest from this patch up until midsummer, something like that, early July in some years, and then we don't harvest this anymore because we have our annual vegetables. Sometimes we harvest a bit in the fall, but usually we let this all of this just die down. So this patch is also self-mulching, so we haven't added any mulch for the last 3 years. We put about half an hour of effort into adding some compost and doing very minimal weeding in the spot, and we get a lot of yield. Like all the greens we eat from now until the end of June come from this small patch of 30 square meters. So this kind of emulates many of the characteristics that we find in the forest as well, but of course it doesn't look like a forest by any means. And when I read up while writing the book about succession and so on, I found several studies that described situations where succession can just stall. It kind of stops at one point, and it's kind of a locked situation. You have all these plants there, and everyone's just waiting for a disturbance to happen, and no one's going to give in at all. No one's going to back off at all. You sometimes can see this, at least in Sweden, in old train stations. There's these kind of shrub forests coming up, and they kind of remain like that for a few decades, and then somebody comes and cuts it down again. But if you waited for longer, at some point suddenly this power balance is destroyed, and a few trees get an advantage, and it becomes a forest. And that's kind of what seemed to it wasn't planned, I can't claim that, but it kind of seemed to have happened here, that we've locked the successional process in this situation. And what's going to happen, we don't know, but there's no tree seeds coming in. There's lots of trees with wind-borne seeds that kind of seed into the site, but I haven't seen a single tree coming up in this patch. It's kind of self-maintaining to a very large degree, interestingly enough. And what we grow here is, well, there's one woody plant. It's a grape just climbs up on a dead tree we have in the back here. It's a hosta, which is a very common ornamental, but actually also my favorite perennial vegetable, the most well-tasting perennial vegetable that I can think of. We have walking onion, the one that has onions on the top. This one grows really tall, up to 1.5 meters, with big bulbs, very nice. We have Siberian chives, it's called apparently in English. It's a kind of a broad-leaved onion, very early. It's already this tall this year. Also nice tasting, very hardy. And then musk mallow, mixed mallow in Swedish, which is our base, like our staple salad ingredient. It's the base in all our salads at this time of the year. It's been very dry now, so they haven't been growing very well so far this year. We haven't had any rain basically in all of April. And it's been very cold too during the nights, -10, just 10 days ago in the mornings. So this one is not doing too well this year, but usually this is what makes the base in our salads. We also have sandleek, which is a native plant to Sweden. It's native to the southeast of Sweden and Gotland. And this has been spreading in the garden quite nicely. I just threw out a few bulbs 10 years ago, and it's been coming up in all kinds of places. So that one is actually one weed that's coming into the garden, a very welcome weed. It's like a leek, a very early leek plant, small leek. See this? Use it quite a bit at this time of the year too. We also grow skirret, which is one of the few perennial root crops that we grow, and it's also a very old cultivated plant that was very common in European and North American gardens 400 years ago, maybe, before we started to grow carrots in a larger scale, or the carrots were grown back then as well, but this one was kind of outcompeted by carrots. It's quite sweet. It's called sockerrot in Swedish, so the sugar root. Very nice tasting, very kind of individual taste. Doesn't really taste like anything else, even if it reminds of a carrot to a certain degree. And you can also eat the shoots, which are nice and nutrient rich in spring. And the one vegetable we use most is this one, Good King Henry. It's it's not very nice tasting. It's not like you go, wow, what a nice taste, I want this every day. But it's really nutritious. It's kind of neutral, sometimes a bit bitter in taste. And we eat the leaves now. We start to harvest them. And we always look forward to these flower stalks before they start to flower, and they're just all green. This basically replaces broccoli for us. We don't grow broccoli anymore. We're terrible at growing annual kale and cabbage plants and so on. So broccoli we basically stopped growing because we have this instead, which is even more way more nutrient rich than broccoli is. Those you can harvest from May until, with a short break in the summer, up until October or even November in mild years. Yes?
Similar taste as broccoli? Or
Yeah, kind of reminds of it. It's a bit more intense and doesn't have any like cabbage flavor to it, but it's still kind of from the texture-wise and the way you use it, it's quite similar to me at least. Not everyone likes it, but I really love this one.
It's a taste to acquire as well. So
Yeah, like many of these. Yeah, exactly. And then we can't harvest all of these. We grow tired of these Good King Henry broccolis, even though they're good and tasty and nutritious and all that, but we can't grow all of them. And every time you cut these with scissors, you're going to get new ones on the sides, and they're smaller. And those ones we let go in seed, and then we harvest the seeds that look like this. This is a very close relative to quinoa, this hyped crop from South America, which also is grown in Finland, I think, to some extent. And this one is perennial and is even more nutritious. There was an analysis being made 2 years ago, I think, in Sweden, where they compared quinoa and Good King Henry seeds, and these contain more nutrients than the quinoa seeds do, which is not surprising because this plant has a permanent, massive root system, which can extract more nutrients and put them into these nice seeds. And all you have to do is soak them in water, then all this stuff will float to the surface. You skim that off, you boil it once, put away the water, add new water, boil it once more, just to get rid of the saponins, which can be irritant to people. And I think you do the same thing with quinoa when you harvest it.
Have you ever tried using that soaking water as soap?
I haven't actually, no. Yeah, it's a good idea. Shampoo maybe. Yeah, you can feel it's quite. It really feels like soap when you've boiled it once in the. Or even if you just soak them in the water, in the cold water, you feel it's really soapy. Yeah, and then you have a nice dish. It tastes like quinoa. Has a nice. They're black, and it kind of adds to the eating experience when you have black food. Is kind of exotic to me at least. So very nice. I can really recommend it. We've harvested from this patch. We've harvested about 100 grams per square meter, which corresponds to 1 ton per hectare, which is really good for a perennial seed crop. Given that you also can harvest the flower stalks and the leaves, so it's quite a bit of production, and it's not been bred to any extent. So it's a really interesting perennial staple crop, which is in a few places in Sweden there's some more large-scale projects going on around this.
And that just regrows by itself, like.
Yeah, yeah,
This is
yeah.
great.
Yeah, you can definitely. You have to mulch it or manure it.
Yeah,
yeah. Give it some, feed it in some way
Give
in
some
the spring.
care,
Yeah. Give it some care, then it's gonna. Yeah, our plant is. It was divided. The mother plant was decades old, and we divided that one. And our plant is the oldest perennial vegetable we have. It's from 2007, so that's 12 years now, and it's just getting more and more massive and more productive for every year. So it's a fantastic crop.